Just a few weeks ago I joined a 1-week-long game jam with cash prizes for the top 3 games, and I got a very pleasant surprise when the winning entries were announced.
Okay, and for first place, claiming the $300 prize, the island.
Woohoo! Yes! In this video I'm going to take you behind the scenes and show exactly how I made the game and also the key strategies I followed, which I believe were the reason why this game did so well unlike my previous game jam entries. So stick around until the end of this video if you want to hear more about these strategies, which I think can be valuable for anyone wanting to boost their chances of success in future game jams. For those of you who don't know what a game jam is, it's basically a competition where a community of game developers give up their sleep, health and sanity to make a video game in a short period of time with the constraint of a given theme. It may sound horrible, but it's actually a lot of fun and can be a great foundation to build upon on your next commercial game or hobby project. Just take a look at games like Superhot, Hollow Knight and A Short Hike. Massive commercial success stories, and they started out as a small game entry submitted to a game jam. And believe me, all these successful games were kind of programmer art looking initially. Take a look at Hollow Knight for example, which at this time was called Hunger Knight. Anyway, the game jam I chose to take part in was the Sasquatch Bee Game Jam, and the theme for the jam was Evolve. My initial idea when I heard the theme Evolve was a lore that surrounds evolution, a game where you have to evolve throughout the evolution of life to eventually reach the present time. Apart from the theme, this game jam also had a requirement to use an avatar from the asset pack provided by the sponsor of the game jam, and this is the one I choose to import to the project. Alright, the game needs a core movement mechanic for the player. Lately I've been playing a lot of Crossroad and I really gotten into this grid-based movement mechanic, so I created a similar system for this where the player moves by doing somersaults from one grid to another. I'm not sure why, but it just felt right, so I went with my gut feeling here. But the somersaults are not just for show, they allow the player to dodge projectiles and also stomp on enemies like these temporary enemy placeholders. On the second day I focused on building the evolve mechanic. I imported an animal asset pack and picked some characters to use in the game to represent the evolution timeline before reaching the final evolve stage, Alex, which is our main protagonist. So the premise is you start as a fish evolving into a turtle and then a monkey and eventually a human in the final stage. Each level features several waves of enemies. After surviving a wave you can collect a DNA strand, which eventually allows you to evolve to the next level and character. At this time, halfway into the jam, it started to look like an actual game with a somewhat complete game loop in place. I decided to create a small island to limit the space for the player, and I also found some rocks and some palm trees to decorate the island with. And when everything looked good enough, I imported it to Unity and added a water shader surrounding the island. At this time, I already knew that the last day would be a 24-hour crunch to get everything up and running with all the things left on the to-do list, and also to make the game look somewhat polished. The last day started out with a big cup of coffee to be able to knock off as many tasks as possible of the to-do list before deadline, so no time to waste here, full crunch mode at this point. As always, the final stretch was hectic and several tasks on the to-do list had to be cut out unfortunately, but at least the game was in a playable state without any game-breaking bugs. What I did manage to create the last day was an intro to give the game some context and explain why you start off as a fish. In the beginning of the game you get sucked into a vortex which takes you back to the beginning of evolution, jumping up on land to start a hunt for DNA strands to evolve to a more sophisticated animal. A couple of hours before deadline, so I decided to just upload the game in the state it was. With almost no balancing or playtest, my confidence weren't on top, but oh boy that bed felt welcoming when I finally went offline. And to my surprise, among all the fantastic entries in the game jam, my game ranked at the top and won the Eurobo. And what made this game jam even better was a $500 cash prize for the top 3 games. Not enough to buy a Lamborghini, but a nice bonus on top of the fun of participating in a game jam. Okay, what was the secret sauce that made my game successful this time compared to my previous game jams? Well, I did things a bit different by following these key strategies. Having a defined beginning, middle and end is essential to give the player a good and clear context to the game right away. In my opinion, this is more important than making the game long, especially in game jams where most players only spend 5 to 10 minutes before moving on to the next game. For example, my game lasted less than 10 minutes for most players, but that's fine for a game jam entry. It lets the player experience the full game and grasp the story. This also ties the game experience to the theme with no confusion about the game's purpose. This is why I think you should spend time on doing some kind of intro to your game. It doesn't have to be fancy, but just something to tell a story and give context. Be aware of your weaknesses. Every developer has their strengths and weaknesses. One important strategy is to look at your previous results from game jams. What category did you fail on, and focus to improve on these ones. For example, if sound design is a weakness of yours, begin adding sounds and try them out early on in the process to make it as good as possible. In my case, sound and music has been something I always left out until the end, which resulted in low scores. It was my weak spot at this time as well, but not as bad as it used to be. And this was one of the reasons I ranked on top this game jam. Try adding a touch of humor and personality to the game. In a game jam event where players experience many games in a short period of time, it's important to stand out and do something memorable. Give the players something quirky and fun that makes them smile. This can make your game stand out and result in higher scores. For example, in my case, the turtle landing on his back or the quirky somersaults for the main character Alex. Small details like this can make a lasting impression and increases your chances to get good scores. Yes, it is cool to make your own custom assets. I made a few for this game myself, like the island where I had a specific style in mind. But do yourself a favor, use as many pre-made assets as possible and reskin them to match your style. This will save you a ton of time, which you can spend on polishing the game instead. You can always add more custom elements later on if there's time. The game loop should be dead simple to understand. Most people just don't have the patience if the game loop is too advanced and hard to learn. Just like having a clear beginning, middle and end, the game loop and core mechanics should be easy to pick up and play. And add a simple tutorial if necessary. In my case, the only thing I needed to teach the player was how to move in 4 directions, which is almost impossible to misunderstand. I believe this simplicity was the reason why my game ranked number 1 in the fun category of the community vote. Easy to pick up and easy to understand from the start. Perhaps the most obvious strategy is to keep the scope small, and I really mean small. Focus on a simple gameplay loop and cut out everything else, at least at the start of the game jam. Aim to have a complete and playable game loop done by the halfway point of the jam. In my case, this was by the end of day 2. And when I say a playable game loop, I also mean a functioning UI. Don't wait until the last minute to do the UI. Trust me, just don't. In this way you can spend the rest of the time polishing the game and make it feel juicy and look pretty. And this is very important if you want those high scores. And finally, the most important strategy I follow: having fun. A game jam should always be an enjoyable experience, and the main focus shouldn't be about winning or ranking high. I had a ton of fun playing what other game developers were creating during the jam, and the feedback you get from when people are playing a game is really rewarding and you will learn a lot of it, and also a great opportunity to actually finishing a game. And that's about it. See ya!